Hi, Amy. Thanks for
I
joining us today. Before we launch into the interview, could you take a moment and just talk a little bit about your experience?
well, my name is Amy Bandelier. I mostly have worked in hospital settings. I've also worked in wound clinics. I worked for industry for a while. I worked for Encompass Therapeutic Support Systems and was the clinical educator for the division that sold mattresses. And I'm back in a hospital setting now where we have a 700-bed hospital. There's three of the wound ostomy continence nurses here, and we just run the whole hospital with wound care and ostomy.
As you know, we're very interested in your views on how linen can impact skin integrity and other kinds of patient care issues, including patient satisfaction. What do you feel are some of the key impacts and key effects that linen has in your patient population?
Well, there's a couple that come to mind right off the bat. First of all, if a patient's incontinent and we put them on a low air loss bed, they have to have a special pad underneath them. It will allow the air to go through to keep their skin dry, especially if we're already seeing skin breakdown.
Right.
We have a problem with the nurses like to use a lot of pads because they feel if one pad's soiled, then they can just take that out and then there's a clean one right underneath.
Right.
So the amount of linen that's piled up under a patient has been a huge issue over the years of being a wound ostomy nurse. That's another educational area with the nurses that more is not always better because that will cause pressure and that will cause pressure breakdowns. Um, Having sheets that don't fit the bed, especially if you have special qualities to the mattress where it has air chambers and you want the air chambers to function to relieve the pressure, if the sheets are too short and they're crimping the structure of the mattress, then the mattress isn't going to function in its proper capacity. So that's another area that we have to be careful about and talk to the nurses about. And then we also have to get involved with the people that supply our linen, if that is the case, to get long enough sheets.
Right. You mentioned that you've had a problem in the past with nurses doing a lot of layers, especially on your specialty mattresses. Do you see that changing? Do you see that continuing to be a problem? Or do you think that nurses are finally getting the message that they're not supposed to layer?
It depends on if it's an older nurse that's been working for a long time or a young nurse that's just come out of nursing school. The
Mhm.
younger nurses seem to get the point a little better. Maybe they've had it hammered into them more.
Yeah.
The older nurses are the ones that are still layering, and it worked back then, and it's going to do it now. So.
Yep. Well, let's talk a little bit about the quality of the processing of linen. Do you ever encounter problems in the work that you do with product that is either stained or torn, product that is perhaps rough from problems with balancing the chemicals? Do you ever come across that sort of thing?
I've had patients in the past that have had allergic reactions to the laundry soap used in the linen.
Mhm.
Since a lot of the hospitals contract out their linen, the linen comes from an outside source. You can't always keep your control of what product they're using to, wash the linen in. So that has been an issue. The other thing with some of the little tender prednisone skinned patients I have, older adults, when the linen, because they don't use Downy in their wash, and so it doesn't come out too soft. Some of the sheets we find, if they're real rough and scratchy, that I will find abrasions on the elderly patients.
Right.
And, skin friction tears and things like that from being pulled up in the bed.
Yep.
Um, Another thing came to mind that was a while back. We had a patient that, no, I already said that. I'm sorry. That did have an allergy. That's what I was thinking
Yeah.
of.
Okay. Well, how about the link to reimbursement and things like stage 3 and stage 4 pressure ulcers? Do you feel like nurses are aware that, the hospital it can actually suffer financially, and that they link linen utilization with the possibilities of not being reimbursed for things?
I think some of the nurses realize it, but some of them might listen to the talks that are being presented to them, but not really take it to heart.
Right.
I think when nurses get pulled into a deposition for a stage 3 or 4 pressure ulcer is when it really sinks in
Mm-hmm.
of what the problem and issues are and what they really need to be thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I was in a facility just last week, and they use slider sheets. I don't know if you're familiar with some of
No.
the new positioners that are out there, and this one has the slick taffeta bottom. And in this case, they were having a problem with skin breakdown on the back of a patient. They were attributing to the slider sheet, and I had to point out to them that they weren't using the slider sheet correctly. They were using it lengthwise on the bed instead of crosswise on the bed, and the directions for that product specifically say how it's supposed to go on the bed. And I said, you have to realize that if you're going to use this product in a way that is not indicated in the manufacturer's instructions, then the manufacturer cannot be responsible for what could happen to your patient on that sheet. And what I found was the nurses were thinking, yeah, well, this is what's easier for me, but they weren't realizing that there was a negative impact to the patient and what was easier for them. So
Yeah, and they can be held accountable for that.
absolutely they can.
Yeah.
Okay. How about linen utilization? Driving down the amount and poundage of linen that is used in a hospital can be a very big fiscal initiative. And we see that it is more important and less important depending on some of the other things that are happening in a hospital. Is your hospital very conscious of pounds per adjusted patient day and um, trying to be more conservative with linen, or is that sort of an issue that, has come and gone and they're not really paying as much attention to it right now?
Well, I know in February they were doing rounding throughout the whole hospital to talk to the nurses about taking in only what you need as far as
Right.
the linen for the patients and not stacking, 14,000 towels and sheets and pillowcases in the room so that you have it available if the patient has a little accident.
Right.
That the hospital was talking about the cost of the linen
Mm-hmm.
had skyrocketed, and they really wanted the nurses to be, aware of the cost so that they could help them to keep the cost down. So yes, it has been an issue, and I believe it's still an ongoing issue.
Yeah, it's funny when I first got into this business in 1994, I remember talking to people about linen utilization and linen committees, and people kept saying, "Oh, those things don't work. That thing's come and gone. Nurses aren't going to pay attention." And it's funny because here we are so many years later, and it's one of those issues that just keeps coming back. And hospitals will have big initiatives, and then they'll kind of fall by the wayside, and then they'll kick them off again, and it'll become very, very important, and then it'll fall by the wayside again, and then
Yeah.
so it's funny how it never goes away, but from facility to facility, it can kind of lose and gain in importance. Let's talk about some of the more advanced linen technology items. And some of the things that spring to my mind are things like antimicrobial textiles, either with silver or copper infused, threads. Then there's also some antimicrobial coatings out there. There's things like the new highly absorbent reusable underpads that basically compete with the highly absorbent disposable underpads out there. And we already mentioned it, things like the new slider sheets with the slick taffeta backings for positioning. Has your hospital instituted any of those products?
No, not as yet. We don't have anything like that.
Uh-huh. What kind of products are you using for incontinence containment?
Right now, we use the airflow pads if they're on, because it seems like a large percentage of our patients go on low air loss beds.
Right.
So we use the airflow pads, or it's the reusable cotton pads that nurses like to use because they can use it as a lift sheet.
Okay, so you haven't seen any of the highly absorbent reusable products that are now coming out on the market?
Only at conferences.
Okay,
I don't have them in-house.
okay. Are you going to WOCN this year?
Not this year. I've got 2 colleagues that are going.
Okay.
I'm saving my money to go to Canada.
Well, and then there's one in Chicago. I think NPUAP is in Chicago the next year, so maybe we'll see you at that one.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you feel is particularly important that you would like the healthcare linen industry to know as a wound care nurse, as someone who's been in the business actually on both sides of the equation? You've been, with a mattress company and also now back working clinically. Are there things that you wish manufacturers knew? Or messages you would send to them in order for them to come up with more effective products for staff and for clinical care?
Nothing springs to mind right now. I think that the things that are coming out are great. Like you mentioned the slider sheet. I thought that was a great idea. I'm not sure I understand the things about the antimicrobials, but I do in a way too. No, I can't really think of anything right now. I think what we have or what's coming out on the horizon is good.
Okay. Well, Amy, I want to thank you very much for your time and your insight. You've always been a great personal friend and also a great source of very good feedback about what's going on in wound and ostomy care nursing. So thanks again for sharing, and hopefully we'll see each other soon.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye.